Sure. Here's section 1 written out with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag section 1. Echoes of victory, shadows of war. The twin suns of New Terra cast long golden shadows across the monument of remembrance, their light glinting off the black crystalline obelisk that rose hundreds of meters into the sky. Around its base, thousands had gathered in silence. Soldiers, civilians, ambassadors, and veterans of the bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever seen. The war against the Varkal Dominion had ended 6 months ago, but for many, the wounds were still fresh. Admiral Cale Rourke stood at the edge of the crowd, his dress uniform immaculate, the silver trim of the Human Alliance glinting with a hint of pride and melancholy. His face, chiseled by age and war, bore the quiet strength of a man who had seen entire fleets perish and still carried the weight of those sacrifices. Beside him stood Captain Ari Mendoza, younger, sharper, but with eyes that had seen more death than any soldier should. The monument itself had been constructed from salvaged hull fragments of destroyed warships, Varkal and human alike. In its obsidian structure were names, thousands of names, etched in glowing Auric script, constantly shifting to accommodate the endless additions from across the Alliance. "It should feel like an ending," Mendoza said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it doesn't." Rourke nodded slowly. "That's because it isn't." Their moment of reflection was interrupted by the soft buzz of the Admiral's comm implant. A coded signal. "High priority. Rourke here. Admiral, we've received a Level 9 alert from Deep Space Relay Station EOS 3, came the voice of Admiral Sela Harvin, head of Alliance Intelligence. "You're going to want to see this in person. Get to HQ now." Rourke sighed, casting one final glance at the monument. "Peace," he muttered, "is always the briefest season." Hours later, deep beneath the surface of the Alliance Defense Headquarters, Rourke entered a secure chamber. The air was heavy with urgency. Holograms hovered above the main table, displaying swirling, incomprehensible energy patterns and star charts lit with red markers. "Is this from Varkal remnants?" he asked, eyeing the distortions. "No," Harvin replied grimly. "We believe this predates the Varkal by several millennia." The room fell silent. Even in the age of interstellar travel and neural sync warfare, there were still things buried in the darkness of space that no one understood. The data had been captured by a long-range sensor array orbiting the edge of uncharted space, energy spikes, gravity distortions, and a faint, almost imperceptible signal repeating in a dead alien language. "We ran it through the old Mars archives," Harvin said. "The language matches fragments from pre-first contact ruins. The so-called Architect Codex." Rourke's jaw tightened. "I thought those were myths. Religious propaganda." "Maybe. But something's out there. And it's moving." Meanwhile, across the capital, Captain Ari Mendoza sat alone in her quarters. She had declined the after-ceremony celebration. The war had taken its toll, not just physically but spiritually. The faces of those she'd lost haunted her dreams, and lately, those dreams were changing. She saw cities that didn't exist. Towering spires of translucent stone, starships shaped like wings of light, and a voice, distant, gentle, incomprehensible, whispering words she somehow understood. Awaken, blood of stars. The circle turns again. The dreams were vivid, almost too real. And she felt something stirring inside her. Memories that weren't hers, instincts that felt alien, knowledge of technologies she had never studied. She rose and walked to her desk, pulling out the recovered pendant from their last mission, an artifact they'd found in the wreckage of a derelict alien ship. She'd kept it, against protocol, drawn to it for reasons she couldn't explain. It pulsed faintly now, reacting to her touch, as if it were alive. Suddenly, her calm lit up. It was Rourke. "Captain, I need you on the next deep space recon. We've found something, and I think you're the key." She didn't ask how he knew. Deep down, she had known this moment was coming. The war against the Varkal was over, but something older, something buried beneath myth and history, was beginning to awaken. Outside her window, The twin suns dipped below the horizon. Darkness fell over New Terra, and with it came the first true whisper of the storm to come. Let me know when you're ready for Section 2, or want to develop characters or dialogue more deeply. Here is Section 2, written out with a minimum of 700 words. ## Section 2, Whispers in the Void. The stars had never looked so cold. Captain Ari Mendoza stared out of the observation port, watching the distant stars shimmer like shards of ice against the void. The sleek, battle-scarred Triton, a human-alien hybrid starship, drifted silently through the galaxy, its engines humming a low, constant tune that had become almost comforting over the weeks. The ship had once belonged to the Varkal Dominion, a symbol of their ruthless war machine. Now, with a series of retrofits, it was humanity's most advanced vessel, equipped to handle the unknown. And there, at the edge of known space, was the unknown. The mission briefing had been simple: investigate a strange signal coming from deep within uncharted space, from a place where no human or Varkal vessel had ventured. The signal was faint, but its origins couldn't be ignored. The ship had been abandoned for centuries, possibly millennia, drifting near a black star, HFY. The scientists had been cautious in their reports, noting only that it was unlike anything humanity or its allies had ever encountered. The briefing, like everything else since the war, had carried a weight that made Mendoza's shoulders sag with responsibility. But there was more to it. The signal was drawing her, almost pulling her toward it. She didn't understand it, but she could feel the pull, an almost tangible presence in her bones. "Mendoza, you'd better get down here." A voice crackled over the comm. It was Lieutenant Cade Lauren, her first officer. "We've got something." Without hesitation, Mendoza left her quarters and made her way to the bridge, her boots echoing softly down the corridor. Lauren stood at the helm, his brow furrowed as he watched the monitors. His face was hard with the discipline of someone who had survived battles and betrayals, but even he couldn't mask the unease that was creeping into his expression. "What is it?" Mendoza asked as she took her place beside him. "Something's not right," Lauren replied, adjusting the sensors. "We've crossed the outer boundary of the system, but the signal, it's stronger. And I swear the ship, it's changing." Mendoza peered at the holographic readout. The ghostly outline of a massive, derelict vessel appeared in the display, nothing like any ship they had encountered before. Its hull was not metal but something organic. Shaped like a living creature, its curvature too fluid, too graceful to be anything man-made. The ship seemed to pulse with an eerie light, as though breathing. And what really stood out was the presence of strange glyphs on its surface, moving, shifting like liquid patterns across its structure. "Is this Varkal?" Mendoza asked. Lauren shook his head.
"No.
"This is older. It's not even the same technology we've studied in the ruins. This looks like something we only ever found in the Codex." "Architects," Mendoza muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. She had read the ancient texts, the scattered fragments of history left behind by the earliest human civilizations, describing the mysterious species known as the Architects. They were whispered about in legend, their vast ships said to be the foundation of humanity's mysterious rise to power. But they were just that, legends. Myths buried beneath the weight of centuries. Now, it seemed they were not just stories. "We need to board it," Mendoza said, her tone resolute. "Prepare a landing team." The shuttlecraft detached from the Triton and glided silently toward the derelict ship, its engines barely whispering through the vacuum. Mendoza stood at the front, staring through the reinforced viewport at the colossal vessel that loomed ever larger with each passing moment. The strange glyphs shifted once again, and this time, she swore she could hear a faint hum, a sound like a low whisper in her mind. "Stay focused," Mendoza ordered. "We're not here for a sightseeing tour." The shuttle docked at a massive airlock on the side of the ship, its outer surface covered in a thin layer of cosmic dust. Mendoza led the team through the darkened corridor, her boots echoing as they walked down the narrow hallway. The interior of the ship was organic, like the skeleton of a creature rather than a machine. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, faint bioluminescent light illuminating the way. As they moved deeper into the ship, Mendoza's head began to throb. Her fingers tingled, an inexplicable sense of familiarity creeping over her. It was as though something was beckoning her, pulling her deeper into the unknown. "What the hell is that?" Lauren muttered, pointing to the far side of the hall. At the end of the passage stood a vast chamber, its walls lined with strange, shifting symbols. At its center was a pedestal, atop which rested an object glowing softly, an artifact, no bigger than a human hand. It looked like nothing Mendoza had ever seen, a crystalline shape, jagged and beautiful, its core radiating with an otherworldly energy. Mendoza stepped forward, entranced. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the cold surface of the crystal. The moment she made contact, her vision blurred. Images flooded her mind, alien cities, endless stars, and something familiar. A voice, not hers, but speaking in a language she understood. Asterisk, blood of stars to awaken. Asterisk. She staggered back, her heart racing, as a flood of memories, emotions, and visions overwhelmed her senses. This wasn't just a ship, it was a message. And she, for some reason, had been chosen to hear it. Mendoza? Lauren's voice snapped her out of her trance, his concern evident. "I'm fine," she gasped, blinking rapidly. "We need to get out of here. Now." As the team turned to leave, the ship seemed to groan. A deep, resonant sound filled the air, like the rumble of a sleeping giant awakening. Mendoza's eyes widened as the symbols on the walls shifted, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. And then, as if in response, the crystal glowed brighter, casting an eerie light across the chamber. The whispers in her mind grew louder. The circle turns again. And with that, the ship's ancient engines hummed to life, its energy signature suddenly spiking across the galaxy. Let me know if you'd like to proceed with Section 3, or if you need any adjustments or details added. Certainly. Here's Section 3, written out with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 3, Unseen Hands, Unbroken Will. The months following their return to New Terra were filled with uncertainty. After Mendoza's inexplicable encounter with the architect artifact, the alliance between humans and their alien allies had begun to fracture. What had once been a united front against the Varkal Dominion now felt more like a tenuous truce, fraying at the edges. The report Mendoza had brought back, detailing the ancient ship and the strange crystal that had called to her, sent shockwaves through the military and political leadership of the human alliance. Though many dismissed the significance of the encounter as an anomaly, others, particularly the more skeptical factions, saw it as a threat. The alien technology was not just unknown, it was untraceable, deeply unsettling, and most troubling of all, it seemed to resonate with Mendoza herself. Some believed this was proof of something darker, an ancient power lying dormant beneath the surface of the galaxy, waiting to reclaim its control. Admiral Cale Rourke stood at the helm of a war council meeting, surrounded by the various leaders of the galaxy's major factions. His sharp eyes studied the room, each of the leaders shifting in their seats uneasily, their hands fidgeting with data pads, their expressions tense. The High Command had been discussing the next course of action for weeks now, but as the final decisions loomed, it became clearer to Rourke that the human race was at a crossroads. The unknown was no longer some distant problem. It was here, on their doorstep. "We can't afford to wait any longer," Rourke said, breaking the silence. "We've already intercepted another signal from the direction of the architect vessel. It's coming closer. Fast." The alien ambassador, a tall and elegant figure with the features of a species called the Viridians, shifted uncomfortably. "We still don't know what the architects want, Admiral," the Viridian diplomat spoke cautiously. "For all we know, this could be a misunderstanding. We've been tracking the signal, yes, but without understanding it, we risk provoking a conflict where none exists." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Do you want to wait until they're in orbit around Earth before we act?" His voice was low but filled with authority. "The architects didn't just leave us this message. They sent it to Mendoza. We are connected to them in ways we can't yet explain. Do you really think sitting on our hands is the right strategy? The room remained silent, tension hanging heavy. Every leader in the room had their own perspective, their own fears, but none of them could deny what Rourke had said. The truth was, they were no closer to understanding the architects than they had been when the signal first appeared, but that wasn't enough to halt the growing sense of impending danger. Admiral Harvin, the head of Alliance Intelligence, spoke up. "We need more time," she urged. "We have to investigate. If we rush into something, it could have catastrophic consequences. If the architects are truly out there, we're dealing with a power far beyond our understanding. And if they're hostile," she let the thought hang in the air. "What else is new?" Rourke muttered darkly. "We fought the Varkal, we fought the Tari, and we survived. We will survive this too. But we need to move, and we need to do it now." Mendoza had been quiet through the discussion, her gaze fixed on the holographic map of the galaxy, pinpointing the location of the latest energy signatures. She had seen the warning the architects had sent, a warning that echoed in her mind every night when she tried to sleep. The circle turns again. Her connection to the artifact had only deepened since the encounter. She could feel the hum of energy in her veins now, every time she touched the crystal, every time she concentrated on the strange symbols. It was like unlocking a part of herself she never knew existed. The dreams had intensified, too. Visions of galaxies far older than human civilization, of massive structures spanning the stars, their architecture so alien it defied comprehension. And the voice, always the voice. Asterisk, blood of stars awaken. Asterisk. She shook her head, pushing the thoughts aside. Now was not the time for dreams. "Admiral, I agree with Harvin," Mendoza finally said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We can't go in blind. But we can't ignore what's happening either. We have to make a decision, and we need to do it quickly." She turned her gaze toward the Viridian ambassador. "The signal is growing stronger. The architects aren't waiting for us to catch up. Whatever their intentions, they're coming." The Viridian ambassador sighed, their long, angular fingers tapping lightly on the surface of the table. "Then I suppose we have no choice," they said reluctantly. "But we must proceed with caution. My people have seen such signals before long ago. They are not always what they seem." Rourke's eyes hardened. "We've seen enough to know that the danger is real. We don't have the luxury of time. And if you're right about this connection between the architects and Mendoza, then we need to get ahead of them before we're fighting a war we didn't prepare for." Mendoza stood, her stance steady, firm. "I agree. We're going to need a fleet. We're going to need to pull together everything we've got, human and alien alike." For the first time in the meeting, there was a flicker of hope in the room. The alliance was fractured, but it was still intact. Despite the doubts and fears, humanity's sheer will to survive was undeniable. Rourke's leadership, Mendoza's unyielding determination, and the strength of their allies could overcome whatever challenge lay ahead. But that wouldn't be enough if they couldn't act in time. Rourke looked at Mendoza and then at the gathered leaders. "We can't sit back. We must unite, no matter how difficult. We build our forces. We understand the enemy. And we prepare for whatever comes next." Mendoza felt the weight of the task ahead pressed down on her shoulders. The fate of humanity, and perhaps all sentient life, rested on the choices they made in this room. But for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't felt since the war had ended, a flicker of hope. The architects were coming, but humanity had something they couldn't understand. Will. The will to survive, to fight, and to face whatever darkness the stars might bring. Let me know if you want to move on to Section 4, or if you need any further details or adjustments. Absolutely. Here's Section 4, written with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag Section 4, The Rising Storm. The fleet assembled around New Terra was a testament to human resilience and ingenuity. Ships of every shape and size, designed for diplomacy, defense, and exploration, now stood ready for an unknown enemy. Each ship bore the colors of the Human Alliance, a coalition of species that had once united to face the Varkal Dominion. But now, That unity was being tested again, not by a familiar foe, but by something ancient, something far older than any of them had ever imagined. Admiral Cale Rourke stood on the command bridge of the Triton, the flagship of the fleet, gazing out at the enormous armada taking shape. The stars twinkled in the distance, seemingly indifferent to the growing tension. For a moment, Rourke allowed himself to consider how small their civilization was in the grand scale of the galaxy. The architects had been here long before humanity, and perhaps they would be here long after. Still, Rourke was unshakable. He had fought too many battles, lost too many friends, to simply fold in the face of an unknown threat. Humanity would not bend. It would rise. "We're not waiting for them to make the first move," Rourke said to his crew, his voice calm but resolute. "The architects have had centuries to prepare. It's time we did the same." Behind him, Captain Ari Mendoza stood in silence, her gaze lost in the data streaming across her terminal. The signal they had been tracking continued to grow stronger. Each day it came closer, and with each passing hour, the connection between Mendoza and the architect artifact seemed to deepen. She had tried to ignore the growing sense of unease, but the whispers in her mind, the strange, familiar voices, had become impossible to ignore. Something was awakening inside her, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for what that meant. "Mendoza," Rourke's voice broke through her thoughts. "Ready the fleet for immediate deployment. We're not waiting for orders." She nodded, but her mind was still miles away, trapped in the web of visions and dreams she had experienced. In those dreams, she saw entire worlds fall to ruin, ancient cities swallowed by darkness, and ships much like the one they had discovered. The architect's ships, roaming the stars. It was always the same image, always the same voice. Blood of stars awaken. The hum of the Triton's engines filled the air, a constant reminder that time was running out. Mendoza stood up, steeling herself. She couldn't allow the visions to cloud her judgment. The galaxy needed her to be sharp. She needed to be sharp. As the fleet prepared for its final push into the unknown, the mood on the bridge was a mixture of resolve and quiet anxiety. Lieutenant Cade Lauren, Mendoza's right-hand officer, was at his station, tracking the latest readings from the fleet's deep space sensors. His face, usually calm and composed, was etched with concern. Even he couldn't ignore the strange energy patterns emanating from the region of space they were heading toward. They weren't just anomalies, they were patterns, purposeful and deliberate. Someone or something was guiding them. "Admiral, Captain," Lauren spoke up, his voice tinged with unease. "The signal's gone off the charts. It's synchronizing with our systems. Almost like it's trying to communicate." "Communicate?" Mendoza's heart skipped a beat. "With us? Or with the fleet?" "I'm not sure," Lauren replied. "It's affecting our systems, reaching out through the ships. I'm starting to see strange data trails, coordinates. It's like it's pulling us toward something." Rourke frowned. "Pulling us toward what?" Lauren hesitated before answering. "It's leading us to the heart of the system, toward the architect's ship." Mendoza exchanged a glance with Rourke, both of them understanding the unspoken meaning of the report. The architects were making their move. They had been silent for millennia, but now they were drawing them in. And if the fleet followed the signal's path, they would find themselves at the threshold of a new war, a war fought not with weapons, but with the unknown. "We move out," Rourke said with finality. "Full throttle. We'll reach the ship before they can make their move. I want everyone at battle stations." As the Triton and the fleet of Allied ships entered the unknown region of space, the silence of deep space enveloped them. The stars seemed distant, colder than before, as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Mendoza stood in the command center, eyes glued to the data streams as the fleet edged closer to the source of the signal. The energy signatures were increasing exponentially, and something else was happening, something that defied all logic. The space around them seemed to shimmer, warping and twisting like a mirage. The stars no longer formed constellations they recognized. Time itself felt as if it were distorting, bending under the influence of some vast cosmic force. "Admiral, we've entered the perimeter," Mendoza said, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. "Whatever's ahead, it's not just a ship. It's a structure. A whole network." Rourke nodded grimly. "Keep your eyes open. This could be a trap." Suddenly, the ship's systems blinked, shut down, and then rebooted. The lights dimmed for a split second before the holographic interface flared back to life. But the readings on the screen were unlike anything they had seen before. "It's not a trap," Mendoza said, her voice quiet. It's not even a ship anymore." Before them, the structures were not metal, not ships, but vast, pulsating formations, as if they were part of the fabric of the universe itself. They hovered in space, tethered to nothing but sheer will, emanating an ancient and primal power. They were alive. "We've found them," Mendoza whispered. "The architects." But there was no time to marvel. The fleet was already within striking distance, and something else had noticed them. From the heart of the architect structure, a single massive pulse of energy erupted, sending shockwaves through the fleet. The ships reeled from the impact, systems glitching as waves of energy cascaded toward them. "This is it," Rourke said, his voice steady, but there was no mistaking the weight behind it. "Prepare for engagement." The storm was here. The war was about to begin. Let me know if you want to dive deeper into any specific details or need anything further.